Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Friday, September 5th. We have got a full tour of the tech sector planned for you today, folks. We've got a weekend feature about Ozempic that we are going to break down for you. We are also talking to the co-founder of New Limit, the new longevity-focused biotech company that he had founded alongside Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong. That plans to be a great conversation. We've got a great conversation about OpenAI's new hiring platform coming up. And we are also going to get into Nvidia's somewhat circular business operations. It's a very complicated business, but we are going to get right to the bottom of it. But before we do any of that, our first segment today, we are going to bring on two people to help us recap some of the big enterprise software earnings that we've had over the past 2 weeks. Rishi Jaluria runs software equity research at RBC Capital Markets, and Ed Sim at BoldStart has been following this sector for many, many years. Welcome, gentlemen. It's great to have you both.
Thanks for having us.
So, Rishi, I want to start with you. I mean, high level takeaways from software earnings the last 2 weeks. What stood out to you?
Yeah, look, I think there's been really two things that have stood out to me. Number one is just software is not dead, right? I think there was a worry for a while that AI just means the death of software and everything's going away. And, it's a whole separate long conversation. But there's clearly pockets that have performed really well, particularly in, infrastructure software where there's maybe earlier benefits of AI. We talk about MongoDB, talking about Snowflake. Obviously, seeing fantastic results out of those. And then we've seen pockets of names that are maybe a little bit more, quote, AI approved. You think about like Guidewire last night in vertical software. But then at the same time, you have had, really nothing has gone away on the concerns around, seat-based models maybe going away and shifting to consumption. We saw that out of Salesforce and a few others. And there increasingly seems to be these concerns over, for a while, PLG and self-service was, viewed as fantastic. Now with all the changes to SEO and AI search, it's creating concerns about what does that do to top of funnel for all these companies. You heard HubSpot talk about that Monday, Asana, Intuit's talked about it, and it's kind of been a little bit more of a widespread concern. So a lot of different themes that we can pull on, but been very eventful to say the least.
Right. Ed, what stood out to you?
Hey, look, I'm not going to add much to Rishi's comments, but I mean, from my perspective, we are overselling agents right now. I think the future is agentic workflows, and kind of we're in that lull period right now where people are waiting, for example, like Salesforce, to see if they can deliver. And even if they have delivered and they've said they have 6,000 or 12,000 paying customers, it's not enough right now. And everyone's just looking for signs of kind of weakness. There's a narrative that SaaS is dead and that the VCs like us are all funding kind of the next AI native companies. And by the way, doing this for 30 years, I have never seen growth like this in my entire life, where companies go from $0 to $100 million in 2 to 3 years. And look, these are small numbers relative to how big some of these companies are. But, I think the street is kind of watching and saying, is this a trend that's going to just accelerate over the next 2 years?
Right. So, Rishi, Ed is talking about the growth that all these startups are seeing. If we talk about these large cap public software companies that have been around now for a while, I mean, you look at their growth profiles. I mean, look, the stocks move depending on what they say one quarter, what they say the next quarter. It's kind of just, hey, we're slowing. We're not slowing as much. Hey, we're slowing a little less than we thought we were going to. It's a little bit of a game. But the thing that I want to ask you about, Rishi, is broadly speaking, these large enterprise software companies, they are slowing. And that part of that is they're just getting bigger, and it's a law of large numbers. But what is the more secular story here around why these companies are slowing? And what's the long-term solution to, growth profiles that are going from 20% to 10% to something like that?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, you're asking the exact right question. I think that there's three things going on here. Number one is we're still going through this post-COVID digestion period because COVID really pulled forward an acceleration of digital transformation, migration to the cloud. And really in that 2020 to 2021 timeframe, but even in the 5 years before then, all software spending, all SaaS spending was viewed as good, as necessary. And now we're still continuing to rationalize our spend, say, do we really need 1,000 different SaaS applications, or can we consolidate? Do we really need to be running, an observability solution on every single workload, or can we be more particular about it? So that's theme number one. Theme number two is we've seen what I've termed the AI crowding out effect. To be clear, the spending that's going to AI is not cannibalizing existing software spend, but it is taking time and attention away. And so if I had a plan to migrate my HR system to the cloud over 2 years, that's now a 4-year plan, because my entire focus right now from a board level is I need to, quote, figure out my AI strategy. I need to figure out where can I use AI to drive efficiencies, to drive productivity improvements, et cetera. And then the third thing, getting to your point about what can the existing SaaS incumbents do, I think there's two paths that they can take, and I think it's going to be a combination of the two. Number one is build out your own AI native solutions, and you have to be willing to cannibalize your existing business, similar to what happened when we went from on-premise to the cloud with all these SaaS transitions. The second thing is I think there's going to be a huge wave of AI-focused M&A, right? We saw this happen during cloud where, Oracle bought Taleo and Right Now and NetSuite, and SAP bought, Ariba and SuccessFactors and Concur. Same thing's going to happen here in AI. We've started to see it already start to play out. ServiceNow buying Weights and ServiceNow buying MoveWorks, CoreWeave buying Weights and Biases, NICE buying Cognigy. I think we're going to see a lot more AI-focused M&A over the next 1 or 2 years.
Right. And, Rishi is saying, both inorganic growth, but then also organic growth. I mean, developing some of these new AI products. What do you see as a growth strategy for some of these big companies? I mean, is it agents? Is it, convincing people that, hey, you don't need to hire as many people, and that's going to be what boosts the top line here? Or what do you see it?
Yeah, for me, it's a few things. First of all, I talked about agents before, and look, if companies can prove that they can deliver agentic technology that eats into labor, that's a much bigger kind of TAM than just SaaS alone, right? So that's kind of the story. AI is eating software, and can agents eat into labor? And if you can prove that, then it's super exciting. Two is inorganic wise. Rishi, I have the experience. We just sold Protect AI to Palo Alto for over $700 million from a standing start 3.5 years ago, and now we're getting disseminated across the board. Activity in my portfolio from an M&A perspective is off the charts. And one last thing I'll give you an example of, even small vibe coding platforms like Base 44 that was bought for $80 million. It was a one-man company that was generating a couple $1 million in the Wix earnings report. And in his tweet, the founder said he's at $100 to $150 million run rate within 3 months without distribution from Wix. And you're talking about 10 to 15% of a $1 billion company. So there are inorganic opportunities. You don't have to swallow a whale to actually get value out of kind of AI.
Right. And Rishi, I should say, one of the things you wrote this note about this very topic. One of the things you talked about in the note is, the timeline for AI monetization. And I one thing that you did note here is that it's going to take longer than a lot of investors might expect. We're not talking about quarters. We're talking about years. And, that's kind of the point that I hear you getting at, is that there's no point in listening to earnings call after earnings call waiting to say when the light bulb goes off. I mean, this is, I almost think of it like, sort of like crypto. People were talking about it. People kind of forgot about it. And now it's back in this sort of like, warmer all around reception. I almost feel like that's what's going to happen with AI, is it'll kind of go away for a bit and then it'll come back in a larger part. What do you think?
I think that's exactly right. Like the narrative, and you talked about this, the stock shift on narrative, right, rather than actual fundamentals. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. You had people get way ahead of their skis on AI monetization and saying, oh, Agentforce for Salesforce is going to be this, several $100 million business this year. It's not, right? Like it's $100 million today, and that's with probably generous allocation of revenue. These things are going to take time. You have to get the right product out. You have to find the right use cases. You have to find that, quote, killer app that gets everyone to use you. And candidly, outside of, software development and maybe some customer engagement or service, it's really, we don't have too many killer apps in AI yet. It'll happen. It takes time. But a lot of this stuff, even for the right products, is just going to take a long time, not to mention at the large enterprises, you have to get through concerns around security and governance and data privacy. So I always tell investors, even the companies that have really, strong AI strategies and AI roadmaps, it's going to take years to.
It's going to take years, right?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that, it takes a long time to move a battleship, right? A company like Salesforce to deliver product, and you're talking, Rishi said $100 million. I mean, when a 2-man or 8-person company can generate $100 million or 150 in 2 months, that's kind of the trade-off. Can startups, AI native startups, get distribution faster than the incumbents can actually innovate and deliver product, right? And that's the question that the game is being played right now, and we're trying to figure that in real time. Some incumbents will win, like a MongoDB, who have their own vector DB, where every VC went out funding a vector DB company. And the app layer, I got to tell you, got companies like Sierra coming around that just raised a $10 billion, the former co-CEO of Salesforce, and $100 million run rate supposedly from folks. So really, really interesting stories to watch.
Yeah, great. Well, look, I appreciate you both coming on. I mean, we could talk about this, for a lot longer, and I suspect we have longer conversations on each of these topics to dive into, but that is a great primer. So thank you, Rishi and Ed, for coming on. That is Rishi from RBC Capital Markets and Ed from Bold Start Ventures.
Thank you.
Okay, for our next segment, for this weekend's Weekend Magazine Big Read, we have a pretty remarkable story about the extent to which Silicon Valley has embraced GLP-1s as a way of life. These are, of course, the drugs more commonly known as Ozempic and Wegovy and other cousins of those treatments. The information put out a survey asking readers how many of them take these drugs, and the results were honestly stunning, and that led us down a deep rabbit hole of reporting. I want to bring on two people to discuss that story. Ann Gehan is the author of the piece, and Brian Sugar is the founder of Sugar Capital. He's been watching this space very closely. Welcome to you both. It is great to have you.
Hi, Akash.
Hi.
All right, so let's talk about GLP-1. Ann, let's get to the survey results. What do you find?
Well, so GLP-1s, like you said, are kind of eye-poppingly popular in Silicon Valley. 50.5% of respondents to our reader survey last week said that they are currently taking GLP-1s, and a couple extra percentage points of people said that they're not currently taking them, but they've tried them in the past.
And this was like almost 1,000 people that answered the survey, right?
Right.
Okay, so we've got 50% of the information's readers are saying that they use GLP-1. Holy moly, that's not something to keep. Brian, did that surprise you?
No, I'm a proud user.
Okay, so Brian's not surprised, and you talk to some of these people. I mean, they're not just using it for weight loss; they're using it for other things too, right?
Right. Yeah. People are using these drugs in all kinds of different ways. Obviously, weight loss is a huge benefit that a lot of people are seeing. But what I heard more from people about and what people felt more strongly about was a lot of the different kind of mental benefits they're seeing, different lifestyle benefits. Pretty much everyone said, they feel more focused, they feel more energized, their days are not really spent thinking about food, thinking about their next meal, thinking about whether or not to have a snack. And so I think for a lot of people in the tech world, being able to kind of free up that mental energy to focus on other things is really appealing.
Brian, tell us about your personal experience using it.
I was fat and I weighed 175 pounds and I'm like 5'6", and I tried everything for the past couple of years and had a friend that was on GLP. We didn't say that they were, but I was curious and went up to that person and she told me. And I started using it last fall. But then in January, I read a lot about how people use it to reduce the amount of alcohol that they consume. And that was definitely one of the contributors to me being overweight, just drinking and then the bad eating decisions that you make along, the late night deliveries, whatever. So come January, I started taking it and I used it to stop drinking. And that caused a whole host of exceptional changes in my lifestyle and just how I present and how I look. I mean, the amount of people that come up to me on a, weekly basis is just a nice learning loop.
And how did you go about accessing the medication? Because I'm asking because there's a lot of these companies now are offering different ways of getting it. How did you go through it, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, no, I started with ChatGPT just because I have I have high cholesterol, I have high blood pressure, I have all the bad things. So I wanted to make sure it was okay for me. So I used ChatGPT for that. I was embarrassed to talk to my doctor about it because, all the stigma, whatever. Then quickly did a Google search, highly paid, paid marketing arena. So a lot of people sort of advertise to you. And I researched Row and Hims, ultimately decided on Row.
Okay.
And not cheap. I couldn't use my insurance for it, but I think the first couple of months I was paying $1,000 a month for it. It's come down since. But then I started taking it, still really didn't tell my doctor. My wife was really mad about that. But then I went into my doctor in July and told him, and given the results of all of my blood work, he fell off his chair. I mean, given the response that my triglycerides went from almost 400 down to 41.
Right.
My cholesterol level went way down. My blood pressure went from extremely high to 110/70. I mean, the metabolic achievement that I have. I'm a 51-year-old man, and my metabolic age is now 32.
And so when you talked to your doctor, were there any risks that he told you taking it?
He said that there's, it slows down your digestive, and there's some pancreatic and some stomach things, but it's so early.
Right.
And he's a preventative cardiologist, and he believes in using medicine in the future. Like, he thinks everyone should be on a statin, as an example, just as a thing. He believes that if it continues the way that we are going, GLP might be something that everybody is just on in the future if they eating problems or disorders or what have you. But it's been remarkable for me.
So, and Brian is saying, this could be one scenario here, is that more and more people take it. Maybe even everyone takes something like this. And one of the things that you wrote about in the story is that it's not just people who are medically required to take it. There's also kind of this biohacking notion to people taking this drug, right?
Yeah, for sure. People in the biohacking world that are interested in that kind of stuff have definitely started thinking about and kind of experimenting with how they can use GLP-1s. So I talked to someone, a founder, who he said he's tried everything. He's tried Adderall, he's tried drinking a bunch of cold brew, he's tried kind of every classic stimulant trick in the book. And he said that the thing that he thinks works the best for him in terms of focus and energy is taking a really small dose of a GLP-1. And I think that goes back to, spending less kind of mental energy. A lot of people talk about food noise as something that they feel like goes away when they take these drugs.
Right.
So I think it's really interesting to see. And, people in Silicon Valley and the tech world love to kind of experiment on themselves. So I think that's another reason why this has been so interesting to
And in the experts that you talk to, I mean, this whole idea of, microdosing it or not even taking the full prescription, but, just stopping sort of after you see a little bit of benefit. Were there any risks at all with that movement that you heard from experts?
I mean, I think the main kind of expert concern, if there is one, is just that these drugs are so new. A lot of times they haven't been fully tested or studied in a clinical trial or things like that. But it's definitely something that that doctors and researchers are looking into because of how popular this practice has become and because of how many people say that they're seeing really great benefits from it.
Right. Last topic I want to go through with you guys is, Brian, you talked about the companies that you sort of considered taking the drug through. And one of the parts of your story are sort of some of the startups that are now sort of taking advantage or building opportunities around this movement. Brian, I'll start with you. I mean, we've got telemedicine providers that are started getting into this space. What are the other kind of startups that you can see sort of taking advantage of this movement with GLP-1s?
I mean, with this change in consumer behavior, what clearly follows is all the CPG brands out there. I mean, there are a lot of symptoms that happen from taking GLP, from dehydration to constipation to you need more protein, etc. There are companies like Magna for hydration that we're an investor in a lot because of my experience through this. There's a supplement, a superfood called Grunes, which I also take on a daily basis. I used to only take it in the morning as like my daily vitamin, but now I take this, in the afternoon as a snack, and it makes me, my body craves healthy food, and Grunes really satisfies that in kind of the late afternoon when I'm used to think about, maybe a Diet Coke and Doritos or whatever maybe that snack will be. It's become, things like that. So we're on just the hunt right now as an early stage consumer firm looking at all the great startups in that space.
And tell me about some of the startups that you found out about.
Yeah, I mean, Grunes is one that's growing extremely quickly, but I mean, all kinds of products, whether it's healthier versions of soda, healthier versions of snack food. There's just such a huge market now for kind of better for you versions of your classic snacks like Doritos. And a lot of startups, particularly in the food and beverage space, are really trying to capitalize on that just because there is such a huge shift of demand for these healthier options. And a lot of the big consumer goods companies like Pepsi, Kellogg, they've been really struggling because consumers are kind of voting with their dollars
Right,
and
right.
we don't want these unhealthy options anymore.
Great. Well, Anne and Brian, thank you so much for coming on. Again, the survey results were kind of one of the headlines here, and the information obviously is a very tech forward audience, and so it's not representative of the whole world. But hey, if 50% of our readers are taking it, then I'm willing to bet that a good portion of the tech elite are taking it. So thank you so much for coming on, Anne and Brian. That is Anne from The Information and Brian from Sugar Capital. Okay, well, speaking of health trends in Silicon Valley, health span and longevity are two of the hottest topics right now among the tech elite. It has also given rise to a number of companies around the space, as we talked about. One company that is worth paying attention to is New Limit, a genomics company co-founded by Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong. The science it's working on is a little bit complicated, so I'm going to bring on someone to help explain it. Jacob Kimmel is another co-founder with Brian Armstrong on this company. He is also the president of the business. It is his first time on TITV. Jacob, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with y'all.
So, gosh, I almost want to pick up on our last conversation. GLP-1s, 50% of the information's readers, 50% of the tech elite are taking GLP-1s. Does that surprise you?
50% is higher than I would have guessed. It does not shock me. I think if you look at the indications on the label, actually a very wide variety of adults in the US could benefit from this, even just with the approved indications today, probably about a third. So 50% is a little higher than I would have guessed, but not dramatically so.
Right. Well, let's get to your business. So the first question I want to ask you, and I do want to get into the science, but I just want to start with how did you meet Brian Armstrong in the first place?
In a meeting kind of like this, actually. It's less dramatic than you'd think.
Okay.
So my co-founders, Brian and Blake, were both excited about some of the science we work on called epigenetic reprogramming. At the time, the field was very nascent. And so I was running a group at a company inside of Alphabet called Calico that was exploring some of this reprogramming science. And we happened to have a bunch of mutual friends. And so a few of our friends connected us and said, hey, Brian and Blake are really interested in this type of science. Let's have a conversation. And as we got to talking, we realized that all of us thought that this science could be so transformational. It could be the basis of really a new type of biotech company. And that since we were all interested in starting a company like that, it may be better for us to work together than to try and do so separately. And that's really the origin story of New Limit.
So mutual friends, and now between the three of you, how do you divide and conquer? I mean, how involved is he in the business?
Yeah, so Brian's really critical piece of our leadership team. I think each of us brings different expertise. I myself have scientific training, but I've never built a business before. Brian has taken an idea from his laptop to a $100 billion public company, so has operating experience unlike almost any other founder in our generation. Blake, likewise, has an investor at Google Ventures for a long time, really helped start the fund, bring it to doing $2 billion fund every couple of years. And so each of us has a different perspective and different skill sets, and I find we complement each other really well. So when problems arise in a business, there's usually a pretty natural person to take over and manage that problem just based on who has the relevant expertise. So we've gotten a lot of value from having Brian's contributions on company building, how to operate efficiently, how to drive ourselves with metrics. Right. And I think he's really involved in setting the vision and the culture there.
Cool. Well, let's talk about the business. Explain to us in sort of the simplest terms, the science behind what you're building at New Limit.
Sure. It's simpler than you might expect. I always joke epigenetic reprogramming is way more syllables than you probably need to describe this idea.
Okay.
The basic notion is that every cell in your body has the same DNA code. That's actually something we all learned in about third grade biology class, so it's not shocking, but they often skip over a few details after that, which is to say, if every cell has the same code, how are they all doing different things? How are my tongue cells different than my kidney cells, performing these very different roles? And it turns out it's pretty simple. There are some chemical marks on top of your DNA and some of the proteins that your DNA wraps around, kind of like string upon a spool. And they determine which parts of your genome any given cell is using. Again, this is just called the epigenome broadly, but it's really just a bunch of chemical marks. And for a bit of a tech analogy, I think of this kind of like control flow in software. You have if-then statements that determine which blocks of code run depending on what that cell is supposed to do. Unfortunately, as we age, those chemical marks can get degraded. And much like someone running through your code base and randomly commenting out some of your control flow, bad things can happen as a result of that. These cells lose their ability to function the way they did when you were young, and that makes you lose the health and vitality that we all enjoy in our day-to-day lives and makes you more susceptible to almost every disease. So the basic idea behind New Limit is that we may be able to make medicines that activate a special group of genes called transcription factors. These genes are really what set up those chemical marks in the first place as you're growing and first developing into a young adult. If we can use some of those same genes, we might be able to reset that epigenetic mark, that epigenetic code, back to the way it was when you were young, restoring youthful function in aged and disease cells in a way that keeps you healthier longer, rather than only treating you once you become very, very sick. There are a bunch of reasons this is really only possible today, but I think the science is much more real and tangible than many people believe it is at first blush.
Well, I have to tell you, I mean, when I was researching your company, I was reminded actually, I took biology in high school, okay, and I remember memorizing DNA replication, transcription, translation. I mean, those are three big processes. There are 11 steps. Mr. Turner really hammered it into us, so I remember all 11 steps. It took me down memory lane, but the thing that I want to get into with is, okay, so you're building that on a scientific level. Are you building, is it a drug? Is it going to be a treatment? The whole idea here is that we're going to be able to extend healthy lives for people. So, is this something they're going to take every day? Is it a treatment for people who are sick? What does it look like?
Yeah, sure. So it absolutely is a medicine. So we like to keep our business model simple here at New Limit. We're trying to make medicines that keep you healthier longer. That's a very valuable product. Many folks will reimburse us for those. So there's no magic in the middle or questions about how one would eventually monetize something like this. We really see, actually, to cue off of your earlier discussion, the GLP-1s is one of the first examples of a medicine like this that might actually be a medicine for everyone, that all of us might want to take at some point in our lives to add additional healthy years. And if you look at the economics of that medicine, it's really the first medicine that's supported about $1 trillion in market cap. So there are these medicines that, when they benefit all of us, they treat the pathologies that will affect each one of us here and all of our families, can really be some of the most tremendous businesses ever created. So our dream would be to create medicines like this. And I think all you really need to believe to think that this could be a really compelling set of products is that there are other medicines like GLP-1s out there to be discovered, but perhaps these are not the only medicines of this kind. In terms of what the medicine will actually be like when you take it, we're using some technology that would likely be administered as an IV, and ideally, these are relatively infrequent doses. So one of the beautiful things about the epigenome is that once you've modified it, it can actually be quite durable. The existence proof of this is that your cells today have different cell types because of the epigenome. So your eyeball doesn't spontaneously turn into your tongue or your kidney. And it's not hard then, if you take that premise, to believe, okay, if I'm able to rewrite these marks, they could last quite a long time. And so we're thinking initial versions of the product might be dosed every few months, ideally in the limit case.
An IV drip.
Yeah, through an IV drip, basically. And then in the ideal case, you can take that out to maybe once every few years. That's far out for now, and we don't have that data today, but I think it's entirely plausible given the basis of the science. And we've already seen...
Sorry, I was going to say, who would be a candidate for this medication?
Yeah, so the first medicine we're developing is to restore youthful function in hepatocytes. That's just Greek for liver cell. It's almost funny. We even created a separate word for it. And so the cells of your liver actually help determine your metabolism, how you feel after you eat a cheeseburger or have a drink of alcohol, and also determine your energy levels day to day when you wake up. I don't know about you, but I wish I had the same energy level I did when I was in college. So the hope would be that we can restore youthful function in those cells. And initially, we'd go into patients who have a disease that looks like an exacerbated form of the aging that happens in all of us. And these patients really need a medicine like this. Their liver disease is really severe. Ideally, they would benefit very early. And then later on, this could broaden out to about half of all adults have something called metabolic syndrome after they turn 60. This is really a concomitant increase in the rates of heart attacks, diabetes, obesity, strokes. They all happen at the same time. And many of us have seen that in our family members or in our own lives, even if we didn't realize that there was a broader pathology underlying
and
it.
Do you have an estimate on how many years you could add, or how many healthy years you could add to these people's lives?
Yeah, so we get into the realm here of best guesses, and I don't want to make overly audacious claims. What I would say is that if we look backward in time, the first few longevity medicines that exist might be things like statins or, again, GLP-1s. If you look at the health economics behind them, the best guess is that those actually add a year or 2 years of healthy life to the median American. So we think if we're able to make a medicine of comparable impact, it's not totally unreasonable to believe that even just the first product we create could eventually lead to a couple extra years of healthy life for an individual.
Right. And when can we expect this? I mean, it's a slow process. Everything in health tech and biotech takes time. But when can we expect the first product to be on the market?
Yeah, to be on the market is a longer question. We're aiming to be in the clinic by 2028. And then there are a number of contingent steps beyond that to determine exactly when that becomes commercially available and for who, at what rate. But I would say that within a decade or so, I imagine there will be reprogramming medicines available to folks who might hear this, both from us and from others. I really believe this class of medicines is going to be as big as some of the biggest ones that are out there today, like antibodies, which are the plurality of all the best-selling drugs. There are actually more drugs today that do $1 billion in revenue than there are software companies, just to give you a sense of how big these classes of businesses can be. And I think epigenetic reprogramming is sort of the next iteration, the next platform technology that will be built upon.
Right. Great. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for coming on the show. And next time you come on, and we'll have you on soon, why don't you come to us live from the lab where you can show us around the lab and some of the experiments you're running? Because I've seen videos of the blood bags, the frozen blood bags that are around the lab and stuff. It's very fascinating stuff. And so maybe next time you can give us a look at that. That is Jacob Kimmel, the co-founder and president at New Limit. Okay. Well, our next guest is a friend of the show. Sam Lessin is a general partner at Slow Ventures. The company counts Robinhood, Airtable, and Solana among its investments. He is also the husband of Jessica Lessin, our founder and CEO. Sam, welcome back to the show. It's always great to have you.
Always fun to hang out. What's going on?
So, look, I want to talk to you about some news that OpenAI is now doing a rival hiring platform to LinkedIn, which is like the latest of, the dozens of products that it's working on. And I just wanted to ask you, I mean, this is the latest product. What do you think?
Well, I think we have to wait to mid 2026 and see what it is. I mean, they're announcing this extremely ahead of anything real. And I think the interesting note is, if you look at Fiji's blog post, who's now running apps, a great person who put it out, I thought it was really funny. The tags on the post are global affairs community 2025. It's not product. It's not like the next important product. It's global affairs, right? And like the reality is you have a company that is kind of the brand of AI disruption. They've been yelling for years about how AI is going to take away all the jobs in AGI. They're now in a political landscape. They got to launch some stuff like a job center, right? To like make that
to help people find the jobs.
Yeah, like look, this is not Facebook. I believe did a job space when Fiji was there. I don't think she worked on it. I don't remember, but like back in the day too. It's like, so I think the first thing I'd say is like, let's cool our horses a little bit here and see what they're actually doing and why. I don't like that's part of it.
Right.
There is a second part, which is like, look, what should we expect from OpenAI in the coming years in terms of apps and platform? They now have a CEO of apps. Most hyper-growth companies end up in this cycle for a whole bunch of reasons where they launch a ton of stuff, right? Like products. And, there's internal reasons for that. You recruit a bunch of great people. You got to give them spaces to operate in. Like otherwise, they're all falling all over each other on one chat interface. There's just historical reasons. Google went through this, obviously, with their apps platform and things like that. 20 years later, it's a business for them, right? But for many years, these were just kind of free products because they had a lot of engineering cycles and they were hoarding a lot of talent. Facebook went through this and most of that stuff didn't end up working. Some of it did. So I think we'll just see this period, especially as the technology matures, you get to ChatGPT 5 and 6 and there's kind of a flattening out probably of what LLMs can do, right, where you see a ton of products and a ton of experimentation and most of it will get chucked to the garbage bin and some of it might not.
I was going to say, I mean, look, we've got this table that I'll attach in the show notes of all the different things that the information is written about OpenAI is working on. I mean, you've got social media, agents, browser, hardware, collaboration tools, now
it's all the things.
LinkedIn, it's everything, And so my question for you is that a good approach? Is it good to sort of pursue all these different avenues? Is this just experimentation? Is it unfocused? What's your take on it?
Look, I think there's a few things I give you. These are all layered things. So like one from a PR perspective, right? Like, you got to feed the media beast, right? And like, this is like the Trump playbook, right? Which is you just have lots of things. And the reality is that, most of them will be completely forgotten about and irrelevant. Some of them might not be, even from a media perspective. Like you just want to stay current. So like, why not? The second thing to keep in mind is like, these are all, an announcement and putting one PM and an engineer on something is cheap. Right. And so the reality is if you're going to spend $100 gajillion on computers, it's like kind of like free options to put them on it. And I think the thing to keep in mind, which maybe people understand less, but if you've been around a hyperscaling company, you get is like there's also just a momentum to these things where everyone wants to do a thing, if that makes sense, right? So you have a bunch of human engineers and human product people.
You're talking about the employees.
Yeah, like
Everyone
you've
wants to-
aggregated a ton of talent in like a
Okay.
pocket, and like you have infinite resources, and there's not infinite opportunities for growth. So you think about it, it's like there's just a momentum to these things. It might be hyper inefficient, it might be a huge waste of talent, but to some degree, it also just doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
Like it's fine. Like let them all go do a billion things and overpay them for it. It's not that big a deal because the big bet is such a big bet that it's kind of all noise, right?
Well, and
so,
the other thing I kind of think about is, okay, so you have 100 engineers, let's say, then you don't know what to do with them. You give them all products, say, all right, split up into teams, work on some, we'll advertise some. The thing that I think about then is how many of those products are, start with a customer need, and how many actually start with, we just want to build something cool. And I guess the answer to that is, well,
this is the big thing. I mean, a lot of PMs and engineers who worked at big companies, right, leave and they're stunningly unsuccessful as entrepreneurs, right? Because the pattern of entrepreneurship, or what does it mean to be a PM at a place where you have infinite traffic and can throw a bunch of, and have all these resources and whatever, versus doing it independently is massively different. The other thing people forget is like, there are things that actually are stunningly unsuccessful at big companies, but the companies are just so big that they like end up with millions of random users anyway, right? So like, look,
right.
I want to be clear. Like, I actually think the education thing, the idea that like you want education and some sort of credentialing around AI, right? Like, which is what OpenAI is pitching on to the policy. It makes all the sense in the world. That should happen. The idea that there's actually hiring opportunities around AI and I obviously completely agree with. I started a company 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that does effectively uses AI in smart ways to help people hire. I believe in those opportunities. History would say that generally the big platforms don't win those types of things, right? Long term, and like they're not like the right place for it. It's not wrong for them to do it. I think there's like a very different style of entrepreneurship. That's completely separate from the broader point you're making though, which is like, yeah, if you're a big company and you put a bunch of great designers, PMs, and engineers in a room and like they're falling all over themselves because there's one interface and you hire a head of apps, you're going to build a lot of apps and like not all of them warrant that much attention, but because people want to write about them and talk about them and we're talking about them, they're going to happen, right? And they're all mostly going to go away.
So tell me more about this company. This company you built is around AI credentialing?
Well, we've done a little bit of that. The AI credentialing is one thing. Like there is like the Google Clouds certification program, and there is like the Microsoft and like people like that stuff, and it's
super
actually
agent certified. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, like that's just like enterprise credentialing. You want it, you can sell it. There's like no reason to not do it. You'll have first parties to do it and third parties to do it. I think the more interesting thing is like you have Cluey and all these companies that go around being like, cheat on all your interviews, right? And like you're like, well, that's a real problem, right? Because like now I need to figure out how to uncheat on all the interviews. It's happening in schools too and all sorts of things. So that's like one part of it. The second even bigger part is I do think that we're in this moment. I'm not one of these people who thinks college is worthless, but I do think credentialing is on the decline and just show me what you can do is on the rise. And that means talent can come from anywhere. Anyone can learn anything from anything. And I really just care how good you are at a thing. That does change hiring, right? Like in how you think about it. Because really, instead of saying, hey, I need a Stanford grad with this degree because it proves X, Y, and Z, and like I'm using a third party, you're like, look, I don't care where you come from. If you're the best, prove
show me what you
the
can
best.
do. Show me,
right? And like that is actually a meaningful. AI has lots of leverage in that. How do you design the tests, right? Like because you have to be able to test people. You used to just test engineers. You should be able to test a lot more people now.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate at scale? Like, if I get 100,000 applicants to something, how the heck am I going to review them? Like AI has a lot of leverage on that in like non-multiple choice questions, right?
So what is the company that you're working
Standard
on?
Aptitude is the company we started that basically solves these three problems. It says if you have a job you want to hire for, doesn't matter what it is, you talk to us about what the job is in LLM style, tell us the story. We help you actually build great tests to then execute against that. Like actually, what is the test? You're the hiring manager. You have no idea exactly what questions to ask. We help you do that. We help you evaluate the responses so you know who to spend time with and attention on. And then we do a lot around anti-cheating, right? Which is very much like almost stand and deliver style interviewing as opposed to like a multiple choice or a screen-based thing, which is obviously you can cheat on in 2025. So it's basically like standard aptitude is this kind of full startup expression of it, which is in the future, you will not care where people come from. You will care to talk to and hire the best of the best, regardless of how they learned it and got good. but there's a whole different set of infrastructure you need to do that well, right? That's
Right.
going to happen. And I think standard aptitude is a great shot at winning it, but there's going to be like a bunch of energy around that. I just have, we'll see where it comes from is basically.
And so this company, you've co-founded it, it's a portfolio company?
Yeah, so I initially kicked it off and built V0 for my own personal use, and I said we now have a great.
I've learned you do with many things.
I love doing this, and then
Okay.
at this point, Slow Ventures as well as Joe Longsdale's 8VC have financed it. We have a CEO, we have customers. It's like off to the races, and like there are other companies doing this, but I think we're pretty excited about that specific one in the broader context of hiring.
Okay, and so if this venture doesn't work, why might that be?
Oh, so many reasons. It's a startup. They usually don't work, right? But I think like one version is thematically correct, but there's going to be a lot of different people working on different versions of this, right? Is what I would say is like the most obvious.
Including OpenAI, maybe.
We'll see. I think like, again, the ideas are not proprietary, right? In the end of the day. And like, this is like an obvious area to be working in broadly if you know what's going and you believe in kind of the future of how these things are going to play out. Again, I am never worried about startups competing with big platforms, right? Like, I actually think that like this is like a massive misnomer. Is like people like it's very hard to compete with big platforms. I actually think it's incredibly easy to compete with big platforms, so long as you're not doing exactly the core thing they do, right? Don't compete with big companies on their core business because they're very good at it. But do you want to compete with teams that are shaved off, that are kind of finding their independent verticals in a huge ecosystem and competing for resources and attention all day long, right, is the upshot, right?
Great. Well, Sam, we got to run, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing that. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, look, when I heard about this platform, the OpenAI hiring platform, immediately I went to, well, the resumes are going to be fake resumes and the job postings are going to be fake job postings. So what do you do? And I think your point to making people take tests, I think it's a good one. And so,
well, yeah, and
I'm excited to see.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Go do your thing. Talk to ya.
All right. See you soon.
Bye.
Okay. All right. Well, for our final segment, if you thought NVIDIA's business was complicated, we are about to tell you how it is even more nuanced than you might have thought. A new story we published this week in The Information shows the circuitous nature of NVIDIA's business, and I want to bring on Anissa Gardizy to explain the details of what she found out. Anissa, 2 days in a row, welcome back to the show. Oh, you're just on mute. Just.
Oh, gosh.
There you go. All right, let's get into it. All right. It's funny. This happened last Friday, too. Somebody was on mute last Friday. I think one person has got to be on mute on Fridays. Friday brain, but no less. We are the knowledge workers here to serve the audience at The Information. Okay. I want to get into the story. Can you explain to us what Lambda is?
Yes, Lambda is a GPU cloud provider. So that essentially means that Lambda buys GPUs from Nvidia and then rents them out to developers, similar to how an Amazon, Google, or Microsoft might do that. And we call them a GPU cloud provider because they're specifically focused on AI compute as opposed to more traditional forms of computing.
Okay, so they're renting out cloud compute. Now, what do they have to do with NVIDIA?
Well, NVIDIA is their most important.
Other than the fact that NVIDIA does everything, but just walk us through the story that you wrote.
Yeah, sure. So NVIDIA is Lambda's most important supplier. Lambda could not rent out GPUs unless it was able to buy GPUs from NVIDIA. NVIDIA is also a Lambda investor. So has an ownership stake in the company. And what we reported this week was that NVIDIA is also a Lambda customer. So earlier this summer, Lambda signed its largest deal to date, $1.5 billion across a few deals, and the customer is NVIDIA. So, 3 reasons right there why the companies are close.
Okay, so NVIDIA is an investor, they are a supplier, and they are a customer. Why is NVIDIA doing all this with this one company? What's so special about this one company?
Yeah, we've seen this a few times before and written about this in the past, but over the past couple of years, as more companies have needed NVIDIA GPUs, NVIDIA has sort of looked around the room at the companies that offer GPUs. And originally, those big companies were Amazon, Google, Microsoft. And all those companies are working on their own chips. And the core of their business also is not to sell more NVIDIA GPUs. selling GPUs is one part of what they do. And so these startups popped up. A lot of them shifted from crypto, renting out compute to miners. But these companies were like, oh, maybe if we rent GPUs, we'll be able to generate more revenue because AI is the current thing. And NVIDIA saw those companies and thought, we should really partner with these companies because the core of their business will be getting our hardware into the market, and they're not competing with us. And so,
so it seems like a marketing channel, really, for NVIDIA.
I mean, it is. I mean, these are the companies that NVIDIA will mention on earnings calls. They get a spotlight at their annual GTC conference. Sometimes they're first to market with a new product. And these companies help NVIDIA in other ways too. Like one thing we reported was that Lambda went to some Google Cloud customers who were using Google's chip, which we talked about yesterday, the TPU. Yeah. And Lambda employees took on the work of helping that company shift to NVIDIA. So you can kind of imagine Google's not going to do that work.
It's literally a sales team. It's literally a sales team.
An extension of NVIDIA. Yeah. So,
why doesn't NVIDIA just buy the company? I don't understand.
Yeah, this is something that was, on my mind a couple of years ago when we saw how NVIDIA helped CoreWeave, which is now a public company. I don't think NVIDIA would actually want to buy one of these companies. I think they'd rather have 100 of these companies out there doing this kind of
doing their work for them. Okay, so that makes sense. One question I had for you is, and you said CoreWeave was another type of company that NVIDIA sort of had this type of relationship with. Is NVIDIA the only chip company that does stuff like this, or is this kind of common for big chip companies?
I think it sort of started with NVIDIA, but now we're starting to see it happen at other chip companies. Right. AMD is a good example. There are some similar companies in that ecosystem where AMD will invest in a new cloud provider, and then all of a sudden that cloud provider offers AMD chips. I think this is sort of similar to what we also talked about yesterday with Google, helping another cloud provider, FluidStack, finance a deal where it's going to have TPUs. Right. But I think we sort of started to see this stuff with NVIDIA in 2023, and now other companies are just following NVIDIA's playbook.
Right. And last question for you, is there a risk at all in NVIDIA being it's a huge company, Lambda's a smaller company. I don't mean to suggest that if, Lambda's business starts declining or decelerating and all that, it would impact NVIDIA. But, I am sort of wondering about, if NVIDIA has its hand in so many of these different pockets, is there kind of a risk here at all to its business?
Well, that's a good question. I think maybe the biggest risk here for NVIDIA is that, these companies, usually when large enterprise firms go to get compute, they go to one of three, maybe four companies, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Oracle, who have years of experience operating this kind of infrastructure. And so NVIDIA definitely is putting a lot of the eggs in the baskets of companies that have been around for far less time and worked with far less significant customers. But I think NVIDIA might feel fine doing that because they might say, well, these companies are primarily focused on our hardware. They're going to execute the best, but we'll just have to see.
Great. Well, Anissa, thank you for coming on and explaining it to us. I'm sure there are many nuances that we aren't thinking about as well outside of this. And so we will have you on to discuss that even more. That is Anissa Gardizy, who covers the cloud here at The Information. Well, that does it for today's show. A reminder that we are live on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I'm already excited to see you all on this stream on Monday. And so until then, have a great weekend. Bye-bye for now.